Hello everyone. Welcome to Data Stocks Monday Learning. Hello Eric.
Hello, I think I got an echo on my end. My bad. I will fix that. All right, there, we're good to go.
Yeah,
Sorry
thank
about
you.
that.
No worries. I mean, come on, that's Monday. What do you expect?
Yes.
But still, there is Data Stocks developer advocates, people who want to make your week great, and your Monday is the favorite day of the week. And that's Alex Volishnev, developer advocate, and Erick ZIETLOW, developer advocates at Data Stocks. And
Yes.
today with us, I see a lot of people has joined it already and will join us in the next few minutes. And that's incredible to see because, well, this course goes really well and you will see why I'm speaking that in just a few minutes. Hi Pranali, hi Santosh, and that's all
People in there.
great.
Is David here? David was another advocate who was going to help us out with the chat today.
David was
Say hi,
expected to
David.
be here. Where is the David? Hi
We're
Karar.
going to have to go out and ping him quick. All right.
Okay, whatever we are about to start, and I'm really happy to see you all here. As you know, Data Stocks Monday Learning is a program for the developers, from the developers, speaking about the most important topics every week, every Monday. And this Monday is the second part of our 4 weeks program, Docker Containers from Basic to Best Practices. And you know what? Docker is a pretty big topic, so it's very hard to put it all into 8 hours, but I think we did a great job building up the fundamentals and essentials for you. So this is a week 2, and today we are continuing our Docker fundamentals part from the last week. But if you are new to this one, that's again very fine. Just stay tuned. It may be not easy to jump in on the second week. And all the videos, all the materials, homeworks, code samples and others, and still available at our repository. I will show you in a moment. So you are completely fine to catch us up at any point. And in the next weeks, we are going to speak about application development with Docker, as it's a little bit different to the things you use it to do before Docker times. And finally, in the last week, we will do Docker best practices. How not only do, but how to do great with Docker. And now I want to say a great, huge thank you to all of them. The first week of our workshop, of our Docker learning path, was a tremendous success with many thousands of watches on YouTube, more people from 25 countries, or actually I believe more, and 1,000 hours of overall watch time. That's just like 3 years. Oh, no, that's not 3 years, but that's a really long
It's half a work
time.
year for one person.
Yeah. And this picture you see on the right, so that's how room full of 1,000 people looks like. And you know what? We all are distributed all over the world, but I'm really happy to see us doing the same doing the same thing at the same time. And the main point out of that, thank you, I will try to hide to show thank you to you,
A
not
lot of
behind me.
responsibility for us, huh? We got to get it right if it's this many people.
Yeah, that's really that's like that. That's over 1,000 registration. Today it was like 1,100 something registrations, and so many people joined this course. That's great. So, but I think that's a good time to start. And that's week 2 of Docker Containers from Basics to Best Practices, and we proceed with Docker Fundamentals. And to tune up our content, as we usually do, and to understand what's the most important for you and how do you go following with the course, I have to ask 3 questions to know you better. So, if you attended one of our workshops before, you know what to do. And if you didn't, I will help you. Please go to menti.com and use the code 1617756, or just use the QR code shown on your screen. Oh, I'm
If you have
still...
the app, feel free to use the app as well.
Yeah,
It makes it really nice and easy.
From my point of view, easiest way is just to use your mobile phone with a browser. App may work better, but for me, browser works pretty good as well. And it looks like I'm hiding the numbers, which I shouldn't, so I will move out a little bit, and your QR code is very fine, so you aren't hiding anything important. So once again, menti.com/1617756.
And go ahead and hit the little thumbs up button. Oh, it's probably washing out on my screen. I don't know if you can see it. Go ahead and hit the little thumbs up button when you're there, and we...
Good.
Looks like some thumbs up are coming in.
Yeah. So thumbs ups are growing, and we will start. I want us to start as much as possible because we are going to cover a lot of great things today, things I really like. And first question is, did you watch week 1 live or recorded? Live, recorded. Didn't watch at all. Live, recorded. Okay, I can say what it's a little bit different to the first session we did today. There it was a clear win of live session, but still that's absolutely fine to watch the recorded session as well. And if you didn't watch at all, that's again perfectly fine. There can be two situations. You already know some Docker basics, and then you are good to go with us starting this week. And if you didn't watch it and don't have the Docker basics, please stay with us for today. But then don't forget about the watching the recording of the last week, because that's important. Like they are setting up, there are some very important fundamentals. That's interesting. Have you done the week 1 assignment? So I guess I know the answer of 4 people who didn't watch the video. Okay, already finished it. 7, 11, 12.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really lovely. That's seriously, homework is the most important part of the workshop. That's like 100%. Then, in progress, very good, not even started. Don't worry. Take your time, you know your situation the best. Find the moment and then do it later. All the materials stay available for you as long as GitHub running. And YouTube. I hope we have some time on that. Although, the year 2020 is a bit special. So
2022, the world's coming to an end, so we'll see.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, and I only watch the course. Again, that's for you to decide. And finally, did you use local Docker installation or play with Docker cloud environment? Local. Neither. Play with Docker.
A lot of local.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Some years ago, it was very not easy to handle Docker using Windows or Mac, but now it's like very smooth, except for our Windows 10 home friends. I hope you aren't in this list, but well, yeah. So local installation is good. Play with Docker is good as well, and is neither. Then I'm very curious, but okay. There were a lot of people who didn't start the homework. That's why.
Right.
Okay, so we suggest local installation. If you cannot do it, then play with Docker will be a good choice as well. And thank you so much for answering our questions. Don't quit Menti. We will have a quiz. We will play a quiz and give out some swag. And we will have a couple of questions in the end. And now we can start. Data. I like this word. That's a very important word. All our applications.
Keeps us employed.
Yeah, all our applications worth nothing without data. How much would Facebook cost with all the data lost? And here is a very big issue. Docker containers by design expandable. That's a very old DevOps joke about the pet and the kettle. With the pet, your pet has a name and your kettle has an ID. And if your pet is sick, you bring it to a veterinarian. And if your kettle is sick, you well, terminated, speaking DevOps way of things. So, and then you get a new one. And this way doesn't work so well with data, because if you delete your database, you are now mostly probably going to be in troubles. And Docker containers are designed to be expandable. Today you have 10, tomorrow you have 2, the day after tomorrow you have 200, and they all are new. So how do we treat persistent data with Docker? Let's take a look. So there are two main ways to persist data working with Docker: bind mounts and volumes. And I will tell you a secret. Technically, it's exactly the same way. Seriously.
It's all the traditional stuff we used to do when we were running VMs, right? You'd set up your drives, set up your share folders, all that. It's kind of holdover from that era.
Yeah, and that's idea is mostly the same, especially for bind mounts, which we are going to cover right now. There is a folder on your file system, an application you are developing, and there is a folder in the container, empty, let's say. And you mount one to another, and now both your container and your file system are working with exactly the same files. Idea is simple as that. So what's the bind mount? That's a simple and very traditional way to mount a local folder or file into the container file system. It's a little bit limited in comparison with volumes, but it's like very well known and very often used. It allows direct access from the container to the file system and from your computer to the file, well, because basically it's a file system of your computer. By default, it's read-write, and you can set it to read-only, so container will not be able to write to it. And it's managed by user, so it's not a separate Docker entity you handle with Docker CLI commands, but that's just a simple mount, like you may mount new device in Linux, for example. And there is a very important point. For bind mounts, they consider host data more important. They're designed to work with the data you develop on your computer, or you are having on your computer, even if you don't develop it as it is. And for example, then you mount your folder to some place, to some path in the container. If you have some files in your disk, on your folder you are mounting on containers, your files will precede. So you will have those files on both container and your machine, not vice versa, because local files are more important. That's how bind mount works. And we prefer, as say, to use bind mounts for the cases when data comes from host, so from your main system. And then we want to run a container from an image, mounting by binding a mount point here. We do it usually like that. Like
oof, that's ugly.
Yeah, that's not really beautiful, but it works, you know. So give me my pointer. So take a look. When we are going to Docker run a container, there are two ways to execute these binding. First one is -- volume, or more traditionally -v. And second one, new one, is -- mount. And it was actually something new to me, because the times I was so close with Docker, so we were like almost a family. Mount was not a thing at all. So, and more traditional way is to using like -v, then you specify local path, and then you specify container path, and then you can specify access mode. For example, in this case, my local path will be home Anna project, and my container path will be /app, and access mode will be read-only, like I don't want container to write anything to this folder. And that's an important thing, very important thing. This part should be an absolute path, because if you try to use a local path, Docker will think it's not a bind mount, it's a volume, and it will try to use it as a volume. It will fail, and it will cry aloud like, okay, what do you give me? That's not a bind mount, that's not volume, I can't work with that. And as you don't want to have paths like that in your projects, because you will have different users with different developers. That's the most traditional way to mount things, using Linux commands like docker parentheses pvd for the current directory. And therefore, this current directory in this case will be mounted as a directory opt project to the container. Another approach, which is now considered preferred, although volume is not deprecated, but this one is preferred, so maybe -v will be at some point deprecated, but it's not a thing yet. Then if you go with the new way, and if you are only starting to use Docker, and there is no legacy, then I suggest you to start going this way, as Docker team suggests. You go with docker run -- mount, and then you specify, notice no spaces, that's just a single string. You can specify type bind, because that's a bind mount, source, your local folder you're going to bind, and target, therefore target where are you going to mount that. Very simple as that. And again, don't forget, as on slide on the right side, this is a local folder you are usually working with. So if you are working with, I don't know, Windows, it's going to be something like C, users, username, projects, my project, that's it. And for Linux people, it will be like home, username, project name. So something you access directly from your computer.
Yeah, we got a couple questions here in chat. Anywhere type file system. Oh, I think they're asking any specific file system use NTFS, ext, fat. Really, Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe it matters. Docker really doesn't care what file system you're running. It's a consumer. It doesn't really utilize anything specific there. Am I wrong on that?
That's a good question. So I'm trying to remember how it works in such deeps. You see, as Docker containers are mostly Linux systems, I do expect them, well, to be honest, that's a good thing to ask, to make an experiment and check. Because, well, most of the time I was using that, it was ext4 a while ago, and now I can just get answer on that. File system on mount. So
yeah, I know it works on ext4. Looking this up, and I believe it works on NTFS as well, because I mean Windows is all running MTFS, so shouldn't have an issue there.
Yep. Good. So let's go on. So, and there is a second kind of a mount we also have to cover, and it works differently, and mostly probably you are going to use both. Second one is a volume, and volume means there is a special entity handled by Docker, and if you can watch it, inspect it, create it, and delete it using Docker commands like docker volume create, docker volume list, docker volume inspect, volume ID or volume name. That's just another way to handle persistent data, and technically internally it works exactly the same way. So you have a folder also on your file system, but in the very deeps of the file system in the Docker zone. So it's going to be var lib docker blah 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 volumes, very deep inside. This kind of persistent data storage is designed for the data which comes from container. For example, you have a database running in container, like we are going to do today, and you do an insert statement and you add some data on that. And you store it, and container in the end stores it as a on a disk space as a file to persist that.
We've got a couple questions. What is Docker Zone?
Docker Zone is just a joke. So Docker Zone, I mean, you have a folder, you have a user space. So home, username, like let's speak about my place. We have this, I will call pvd. We have these, as I'm using Mac, we have users, Alexander Volochnev, and that's my home folder, and that's my space, and I can create files and so on and so forth. But also in the deeps of Mac or Unix, we have some, I don't know, var folders where you usually don't go alone as...
Can you expand the text a little bit on screen there?
Yep. So I hope now it's better. Okay, I hope. Please, regarding the screen quality, don't forget to check your quality on YouTube, because if you have low quality on YouTube, whatever I do, if it will be not clear. So double check you have a good setup for the stream, so you can read that.
Yeah, you want at least 480p quality. So if you click on the little gear there at the bottom of the YouTube window, go to quality, make sure you're at least at 480. 720 is going to be significantly better, but 480 is an absolute must.
Yeah, because we definitely stream in a high quality, there is no doubts. And YouTube is perfectly fine with the stream health, thanks to YouTube. Good. So, anyway, and speaking of that, Docker zone is just the area of files where Docker is the owner. That's usually varlib Docker for Linux systems. So Docker zone is a joke by itself. Good. We have to proceed. Good. Fine. Good. And finally, stop. I'm not done on that. So Docker manages volumes, and volume in Docker, it's still the same folder stored somewhere in Docker zone, but that's also a Docker managed entity, so it understands what were the volumes. You can list them, inspect them, create them, and delete them. Now that's important. Volumes are preferred for the cases when data comes from a container. You insert something into the database makes an insert, present a file on a disk, so file was stored by database runs in the container, data comes from a container, and therefore for these use cases, volumes may work better.
You know, it's interesting, the whole statement of infrastructure as code, I think volumes are a perfect way to explain that. Because you're literally taking something that used to be a piece of hardware, or a hard drive, and you're turning it into a virtual object that you're deploying and getting rid of. You're standing up and taking down with a line of code. So, the first time I heard infrastructure as code, it was a very confusing concept to me because I had never dealt with any of that. But volumes are just a wonderful way to view that. The other way you could view it is, when you have Docker here and you've got all these different pieces, you get your storage volumes, you got your actual apps that are running. It's like if you go into a restaurant and you want to order things off of a menu. You could order, your hamburger, your fries, your drink, or with the Docker equivalent would be you just order the value member. I want a meal number 5, and then you get all those things brought straight to you. So kind of a cool little concept, the infrastructure as code stuff.
Good. So, we are going to speak a lot about infrastructure as a code later today. Yes, I really like this concept as well. So, good. And finally, some steps about volumes. So, creation of a volume is first Docker commands, as said. As it's a Docker regular, wrong button. As it's a regular Docker entity, you can use exactly the same things as with our Docker entities. So Docker volume create, Docker volume list, Docker volume inspect, Docker volume remove, and so on. And what's when we are working with the volumes using Docker run, we can use it in the following way. First of all, Docker run -v, we specify volume name and container path, and that's the collision I told you before. If your path you want to use for bind mount looks like volume name, it will be interpreted as a volume name.
Right.
So you see, here is a very simple thing, just a name, just a simple string. Project data, it will be interpreted as the named volume. So volume with a name, and it will be created if it doesn't exist and mounted to /up container path. Another way to do it, as I said before, more modern way, like more recommended way now to do, is -- mount with source will be volume name and target will be the container path where exactly you are going to mount it. So if we are mounting container to store MySQL data, if we are mounting volume to store MySQL database data, our target is going to be varleap MySQL, at least for default MySQL setup.
That's actually, that ties right into a good question we just got, which was, does a volume mount come into the picture when you have a stateful application on Docker? That's a wonderful question.
Yeah, indeed.
Here, I'll let you take that one, Alex.
Yep. Volumes and bind mounts are exactly the thing you use when you want to persist data, because if you run a database on a standalone, you have files and you work with them as usual. But if you run your database in a container and then you don't create volumes and bind mounts, at some point you are going to restart something or recreate containers and you have nothing left. So yes, bind mounts and volumes are exactly the way to persist data for the applications. Well, not only data as like the database data, but any kind of a data you work with, any kind of a files.
Anything you don't want to disappear when the power goes out.
Exactly. And here comes live demo first, persistent data. And we are going to cover three scenarios. MySQL database, no mount, no volume. Recreate, data lost. Then MySQL mount, data kept, local folder. That means what we are going to have data exactly in our folder, like right in front on us. And MySQL volume, data kept, Docker volume. In the second case, we will not have a Docker volume. In the third case, we will have Docker volume. Now, a couple of things I'm going to do right now to keep it more simple and more obvious. I'm going to Docker run based on the MySQL image, MySQL latest. And I'm going to run -d detached. So not in the foreground of my console, but in the background. And then I use -e to define environment variable, MySQL allow empty password equals true. Usually I wouldn't do that, especially on production. But now MySQL in the modern versions in Docker simply doesn't start if you don't give it root password or allow empty password explicitly. So we need just to keep MySQL running. And in this case, I don't have any volume actions or bind mount actions. So that's the first scenario for us. MySQL, no mount, no volume. For the second one, I'm doing exactly the same thing, except of one point. -v, present working directory, MySQL data, bind mounted to varleap MySQL. So this thing will create a local folder MySQL data on my machine, and it will mount it to varleap MySQL. Very well. And finally, last one, I'm doing exactly the same thing with named volume MySQL data. And to attach to existing container, I will do docker exec, ask for interactive terminal with -it, specify container ID I'm going to attach, and I'm going to use MySQL. In this case, MySQL is a command I'm going to execute. Notice there is a difference. This command has MySQL in the end. In this command has MySQL in the end, but those are two very different MySQLs. In this case, that's the name of an image, Docker image I will use to spawn a container. And in this case, it's a console command running inside this container. I will give a particular ID when I will have it running. And finally, I'm going to create database and show databases to ensure what they exist. They do exist. So I don't need pointer anymore. And I need those magical words. So I hope you can see what
Yep, it's coming through.
if I see a question I want to answer. If both commands use dash dash volume or dash dash mount, what distinguishes if it's a file system or volume? So take a look, it's very easy. As I've shown before, if you specify it like that, with, where is it? I need this one. Present. If I specify it like that as a string, it will be named volume. If you specify it like that, it will be bind mount. And that's stupid as hell, and yes it is. That's one of the reasons why now Docker team want to stop using -v command, because it's not obvious, and switch to using --mount command, because it's more obvious. When you mount something which is a bind mount, you specify type bind. When you mount something which is a volume, you just say mount and specify source, like which volume you are going to mount. And
there's another follow-on. Yeah, another follow-on. In other words, what's the advantage of using a mount versus volume? Persistence. Volume is not persistent. It is essentially ephemeral. A mount, on the other hand, is persistent. And if you were to, say, lose that container, it's not going to go away. Think of it almost like a folder, a share folder on a VM in many ways.
Yep. So let me show you, because, well, it's always easier when you see it on your own. So, first thing I'm going to do, actually I did occasionally already, that's just running a MySQL container. And as long as this container is live, I can attach to it. So I can go docker exec -it container name. So I don't know, AF8. I'm just using beginning of this ID because I don't need the full one. Docker will identify by the first unique part of the ID. So this part will be completely enough. And finally, I say what I want to do there. So I will execute MySQL command. And boom, now I'm inside this container with my MySQL command line. And I can ask it to show databases. And there is a typical setup for MySQL. So you have information schema, MySQL, and others. And now I'm going to create something. So I will create a database test1. And you know what? Give me a moment. I will get my mask, and
yeah.
I will move closer to you.
Join me.
Yeah. So people will see my screen, and actually I will switch to something like that. Sorry. Yeah, so this way we will not hide the content. Good. So create database test. Okay, query awk, one row affected. If I ask to show databases again, we have my database there as well, test1. Very great, very lovely. But also, you know, there is a thing, as long as I stop it, so I have my container running, I'm going to stop it. Oops, wrong. And actually, of course, I'm doing my cleanups, and at some point I have not container anymore and no data anymore, no data left. I can try to start it again using the same command, but it will be a new container with new file system, which will be again populated out of what image has, and therefore when I will try to attach to it using the new ID E6322. Okay, it's not initialized yet. What's with the logs?
Generally very, very, very fast. So
yeah, I must have probably just too quick. InnoDB initialization started. Temporary server started. Okay. Why it starts so slow today? That's weird. Ready for connections. Okay, that's something. Now I can attach. And I can ask for databases. And of course, there is no test one because in this case, with no bind volumes or no volumes, it was never persistent on my disk space. It was in the container disk space. And container is disposed already, no data. And that's like not the situation you won't find out yourself.
Yeah, you really don't want to store a database on an ephemeral volume. That's bad news.
Yep. So, okay. And we have some better decisions. Now, how about the next point? We have, oops. Yes. So, we can, oops, wrong side, sorry. Yes, that's what I need. Very well. Now I'm going to execute this command. So, this time it's exactly the same, but with -v, present working directory, MySQL data, var lib MySQL. Image name MySQL container is running. And now I can try to attach to that. I have to wait for a couple of seconds, otherwise MySQL will not be ready. It's going to be 7CF. Okay, it's not ready. I have to be patient.
Yeah, Docker is slow today. Goodness. It's generally almost instant.
Yeah, this morning it was perfectly flying. Maybe it's tired because it's like...
You started streaming, taking all your system resources.
Yeah, but this morning I was streaming as well, but okay. What's going on? Okay, whatever. 1 minute of debug. I'm using docker logs command with follow statement to read the follow statement. To read the follow. Okay, it says user has been MySQLD ready for connections. Very well. So it should be fine. Yes. Okay. And now, again, show databases. No databases available. I mean, okay, only databases available delivered by MySQL. And we again create database. And it will be test2. Boom. Where MySQL server has gone away. Okay. Okay, we have my database created. Test2.
There it is, yeah.
Now, let's take a look at the interesting point. I'm doing Docker volumes. ls. Oh, Docker volume, sorry. And I want to watch at my local folders. Here I have something new, which is MySQL data. This one was not present before. That's basically was recently created. And if we watch what's there, those are MySQL data created by MySQL. When and how? Very easy. I say it, use this folder, and this folder doesn't exist. Docker creates this folder, mounts it as a var lib MySQL to a MySQL container. MySQL watches, okay, there is an empty folder for me. I'm going to populate it. I'm going to initialize. And that's, I have these files here, and I have these files in my container. So we can, for example, do like that. I can create a file, touch MySQL data 1 to 3. File was created. I can find this file. Here we go. Now it exists. And now I can go to docker exec, jump to the same container, but not using MySQL, but bash. And I can go to var lib MySQL. And I can list files. Oops, of course. And I can list files here. And here we go. Here is my newly created file 1 to 3.
There it is.
Yep. And that's the point. folder you have exactly right here, it's the folder you are using in the container. And that's a byte volume, bind mount, so you are taking care of that. Okay, and that will be enough for me with this one, and I'm going to remove, docker, kill. And now I'm going to start a next one. And
there's a question here real quick. Does using a volume have an advantage in terms of replication, etc., over a cluster, or I guess what is called a swarm of containers? I'm not sure I entirely understand the question. I think what they're asking is a volume better for a shared resource between containers? Is that, correct me if that's not your question there?
So I guess with Swarm you cannot use, well, you see, to be honest, I have nearly no experience with Swarm. We were estimating it at my former project like 4 years ago. It was completely unusable those times. Maybe now it's better. As far as I know, with Swarm you can mostly expect it to use volumes. But, well, Swarm has lost. Now Kubernetes is the thing regarding container management. Maybe in the future it will change. There are some possibilities, let's say, but so far, when we speak about container management, we speak about Kubernetes mostly probably. So, and finally, I launched the last example out of this list. I launched it with a MySQL data volume. And take a look. There is a folder, and I'm going to wipe this folder out completely. So I'm doing rm-rf MySQL data. I don't need it anymore. And I just created a volume. Take a look at the Docker volume ls. Now, I had some leftovers from the previous runs, but now that's the thing I was looking for. Now we created a MySQL data volume, and I can access it with Docker volume inspect MySQL data. Good. And we see some very simple definition managed by Docker volume. So created, driver, mount point, and so on and so forth. There is an interesting point. Mount point, varlib, Docker, volumes, MySQL data. Take a look. As with the cloud, it's no cloud, there is someone else's computer. That's exactly the same joke. There are no volumes, it's still local folders. Well, using local driver, of course. But it's mounted now to this container. We will have persistent data there as long as this volume exists, as long as you don't delete that. And there is no local folder anymore, I mean at my place. Okay. So if I do I don't have it right here because it's located here. If I would have a Linux machine, I would show it to you, but I don't have a Linux, I have Mac, and on Mac it works a bit differently because all those things are Linux specific, and for me, for Docker for Mac or Docker for Windows, it runs technically inside virtual machine to make it achievable. Yep. So, and we of course still can go to this machine we created. And we can get these container ID, so we can go to this container ID with 582 MySQL. I guess it's running already very well. And now finally we can create all the databases. Show databases. Nothing. We can create one. Create database test3. Now watch what I'm going to do. So database is here. Now I quit. Now you know what's going to happen. I guess you know what's going to happen. I'm going to do Docker
stop. Can I kill it?
Yes, I'm going to kill that. I'm stopping that. And I'm removing that. Docker remove 582. Boom. There is no container left. The container I've created, this test3 database, is completely wiped out. It doesn't exist anymore. There is no way to retrieve it back. But now...
But the volume...
Volume is still here. Yes. Boom, volume is here. My MySQL data is here. And we go. I create one more container. It will be a new container, but launch it with the same volume attached to the same place. Well, new same place.
Right. And
we will need docker logs -f int a. So ready for connections. Okay, looks good. And I'm going to attach to this one. Oh, something weird happens with my console. Let me reset that. So anyway, I need docker ps docker exec -it e8a. Boom, MySQL. That should be good. Well, MySQL, and wanna bet? Will it show me something?
It'll be there.
Show databases. Boom, test free. Here is our hero. The database which survived. Like in Harry Potter style. Good. So yes, volume is different to container, and then you terminate container, volume stays. And that's important.
In one sense, your Docker container itself is just a consumer of that volume, and it doesn't matter if you spin up, spin down your Docker container 100 times. That volume can be interacted with, written to, read from. It doesn't matter.
Yep. And one last difference I want to highlight again between volumes and mounts.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm using the wrong word there, aren't I?
yeah, that's fine. Then you take a look. And that's literally, once I thought it was a bug, it was not a bug. It was intended difference in their behaviors. Imagine you have a container and it stores some data in the, or a base image for the container stores some data in the folder, like varlib MySQL folder, for example. There are some files and folders. And then you run this container and attaching a new volume. What will happen? Could you try?
It would probably not be able to access, well...
It's not obvious.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to let you tell me.
So I will tell you, with bind mounts, we all use it to the thing. What if you have an empty folder on your local system or not empty? That doesn't matter. So for bind mount, local folder always precedes container folder, and doesn't matter what you have in container at this path. Doesn't matter what you have in the local path and this path. It always will precede. If it's empty, then you will have it empty in the container as well, and that's fine. But for volumes, situation is different. If you create a new volume, empty volume therefore, and attach it to a container and it has some files on the path, those files will be copied to the volume.
Well, interesting. So you could use it essentially to load resources when you're spinning up a container if you wanted to.
Yep, that's an interesting feature. And actually recently I spent a couple of hours fighting with some containers, trying to understand how the hell data gets there. How it works. It should not be working. Okay.
Magical files appearing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, and now a very important thing. I told you so many things about the persistent volumes, bind mounts, so your head might be about to explode. And also there are two ways to communicate with them. Dash mount, dash volume. Like, how the hell I should handle it all? Answer is, there is no simple way. Well, okay, there is one simple way. You just go and start use that. After a couple of mistakes, you will learn how it works. Sorry, I don't have a better magic word for you. I'm a magician a little bit, but I cannot just make it magic happen and for you to learn it all in 1 second.
That's how we learn, though. That's how we learn.
Yeah. Do your homework. Do your homework.
Try it out, fail, and then don't make the same mistakes the next time.
Exactly. So now I'm going to kill this one. Oops. oh, okay, of course. Done. Very well. Do I have any more containers left? No, all containers are down. And now we are going to move on because we still have a lot of things to cover. Good. So, let's go. Multiple containers. So, all the things we did before, always we were using a single container. MySQL, Nginx, whatever, Ubuntu, and all the things we used at last workshop. And most of that, well, was good for educational purposes, but mostly useless from the development or business point of view. Well, Nginx, dispatching static files. I know some people earning money on that. But usually you need to have multiple containers running together. How do you do that? So, situation is very simple. As long as containers are within the same network, they can collaborate. And I say the big word, network. And networking in Docker is a great thing as long as you know how to use that. It may be a bit not so simple in the beginning, but well, for developers there are no so complex tasks, so stay calm, that's all fine for you. There are three main, mostly used network types: overlay, bridge, host. And out of all of them, I would say bridge is like 95, maybe even more use cases for Docker. So if you know what's the bridge network, you are perfectly fine. Overlay, we will not cover it today as it's like for more advanced levels and usually not for developers, but more for operations. Overlay allows you to create software-defined networks from containers running on multiple machines, on my laptop and Erick's laptop, for example, directly. And that's not the thing we are going to do today. Second one, Erick?
I was just going to say there's a quick question before we move on. Can you show the delete test3 database so that it does not get spawned in new volume? So if you don't want it to persist, you can use a volume as opposed to a bind mount. That would basically make it ephemeral, so when that container spins down, that Docker container spins down, your data is going to go away. Otherwise, you can just delete that bind mount from within Docker. But
yep, I hope that's done.
Yeah.
So
back to networks.
Yeah, and there is a question: can you show how to delete the test3 DB so what it doesn't get spawned in the new volume?
Yeah, that's what I just said.
So yes, as long as you have new volume, it will be not spawned there automatically because it's stored on another volume. Or you can just delete volume so data will be removed. Doesn't matter. Okay. So, then we discussed overlay. Overlay is a type of a network you need to connect multiple containers from multiple hosts. Then host. Host is a very interesting type of network, which is actually not a network at all. That sounds very weird because it is. Using the host network, your container will be directly attached to the ports of your host machine, and it may be handy in some use cases. Take a look. By itself, Docker uses so-called SDN, software-defined networks. And although it works very, very fast, it's still a bit slower than the native host connection. And if you want to have, if you want to push on every microsecond performance have on the highest level, you may think on having host type network, so your container will work directly and will serve on the port of your host without any kind of added software defined networks. It's the fastest way. But well, again, that's usually for those who are pushing up to the maximum on production, and that's not for developers. Besides that, it only works on Linux. It doesn't work on Docker for Mac and Docker for Windows, but they are not for production and they are not for highest possible performance, so that's not the case anyway. And final thing, and the most important thing, which people use most of the time, is a bridge type network. So, bridge network is the thing which allows you to contact containers with hosts and with each other. So, when you have a bridge network, all the containers attached to this network will be able to communicate, and all the containers working together will also be able to communicate with the external world, with internet, using network address translation, NAT. Right. And they will be available for host as well. And that's the most typical thing to use. Also, when you use not the default bridge, which is pre-created by Docker for you, but when you use user-defined bridge network, there is a very fancy thing like DNS. So what does that mean? When we create a container, we may arrange name on them. In the default bridge network, they will be able to communicate only using IP addresses. But you know what? Containers are born to be expandable, and you are going to have new IP address every next day.
And you don't want to always have to use something like etcd to add some complexity and handle your where's what and who has what and where do I go for what.
Yep. Good. And now, with a user-defined bridge network, there is a DNS. So when you spawn a new container, you say docker run MySQL. You may say --name and call it database. From now on every machine, on every container attached to this network, this one will be available as exactly the database. So you may say ping database and receive your ISMP responses. And that's the most important one, and that's what we are going to use today. And as network is a first-class Docker citizen, you also have all the kind of comments we just seen with volumes. So you can list all the networks with Docker network ls, Docker network create name, Docker network inspect name, remove them, and also one more option, we can go with Docker network connect, specify network name, specify container name. So newly running container will be connected. So running container will be connected to a specified network. And now there is a good question. Eric, how do you think? Is it easy to run multiple containers with Docker or not so easy?
Well, considering I've done it many times, I'm going to say easy.
And you also know what we expect to have some issues here. Because we are very close to live demo 2 with multiple containers. And first command we have to execute is docker network create VP. And why WP? Why WP? Because we are going to do a first real application which may be used and bring some value. We are going to run WordPress. And we will write a lot of blogs there. How do you think? Is it great?
Oh, WordPress. Yeah.
But whatever, it's a good example. It's a PHP application with MySQL database. Okay, and we have Docker network create WP. It will be a network name with -- driver, and driver will be bridge. As said before, bridge is the most convenient network type for us. In general, I can omit -- driver bridge because it's the default type. But I want to keep it here explicitly. And now we have to run a container. And now the very good question, how do you think which container we should run first, MySQL or WordPress?
Well, I would probably start with MySQL and then set WordPress up after that. We do have a question here in chat too, really quick. How many max containers on a single Docker engine? Any max limit?
Oh,
that's actually a good one. I'm not sure on that answer. Are you, Alex?
Nope. Usually we speak. You see, there is not so many cases when you run thousands of thin containers. Usually,
yeah, I mean that's where like Kubernetes would come in at that point, or something else to help you manage, the massive container setup.
yep. I would say what for some modern applications you want to run with Docker, your system, even MacBook Pro, will be not operational after first 20.
Right.
So yeah, for me it's
It
more
takes some
theoretical
resources.
question. Yeah,
Yeah.
resources will be over sooner when your containers will be over. Okay,
Yes.
so and the correct answer by Karar and Eric is correct. First, we have to run MySQL. That's important, and we will get back to it soon. And running MySQL for our purposes looks like that.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, but for real, read this line and tell me which one is optional and which one we would omit in this case.
Oh goodness. All right, let's see here. Read the encyclopedia.
We need all of them. And let me walk it through over it step by step to show it to our dear attendees. So Docker run, no questions. Detach, yes, we need to have it detached to run in background. Otherwise, when I stop my console, it will be terminated as well, and we want to keep it running. Now, next command, you know what happens here. I'm mounting a volume MySQL data to varlib MySQL, so we will have data persistent. Then I have to attach to network WP, otherwise my containers will be not so easy to communicate with each other, and I will have to use IP addresses, which is not nice. Then I have to give it a name, so this container will be accessible for other containers by name. Then I have to specify a long list of environment variables. In the first one, I specify root password, it's required. In the second one, I specify MySQL database, which will be WordPress for WordPress. In the third one, I specify MySQL user, WordPress again. And in the last one, I specify MySQL password, WordPress, for the WordPress to access my database. And finally, I'm specifying I'm going to use MySQL version 5. And you know what?
All of that headache just to get that one thing set up.
Yes, and you know what? We are just starting, because now we are starting WordPress. And it's, well, mostly the same. So Docker run, we are publishing ports, we are mounting WordPress data volume, because we are going to work with themes and plugins, so WordPress has to store them somewhere. Those are files we also have to handle with volume. We have to attach to the same volume. We has to detach from console for the same purpose to run in background. When we define environment variables for WordPress, database host, database, and port. Question, where does this database comes from?
That's the default port, isn't that?
Yeah, port is default MySQL, and this host comes from here, this name database. If I would call this host database 123, when I would have to write here database 123, that's the name.
It really is like a DNS name.
Yeah, that's exactly the DNS name, yes. Then WordPress database user will be WordPress, WordPress database password will be WordPress, and WordPress database name will be WordPress, and finally image will be WordPress latest. And I have only one question. Am I the only one around here who finds it overcomplicated?
No, there's a better way.
There is a better way. And if after this example you are running away from your screens, crying like Docker is not convenient, I'm not going to use that, wait a second, just trust me, I'm an engineer, and I will show you a better way in a second. But first one, I really want to show you what this one works. And let's go to terminal, because, well, talk is cheap. Show me the code, or at least show me console commands. That's going to be better in any way. So, first thing I'm going to do is Docker network create WP driver bridge. Boom, it's done. Now I can say Docker network ls and watch the list. Here I have 3 pre-default, pre-created networks, bridge, host, and null, and they're pretty funny. Host network doesn't really work on MacBook. known null network with null driver obviously doesn't work at all. It's for containers where you don't need network at all. And breach network default is not convenient because it doesn't support any DNS things inside. And this one I just created.
We've got a couple interesting questions here in the chat.
Shoot.
People are getting ahead of us. Can we create a script to run all these MySQL commands with Docker run? I mean, technically, yes, you could. Should you?
Wait a second. You will see.
Yes.
And I'm going to inspect Docker network, inspect VP. Answering.
Hey, there we go.
Yeah, and that's the network I've just created. Answering this question is maybe we can write a script. My motto is stay lazy. Someone has wrote it already. Okay, so that's the network definition now, and we can see like a name, ID, when it was created, what it's a breach network. It's not internal, so it can communicate with an external world, and many others interesting things. Now, next thing, we are going to run this monstrous docker run command. This one, and that's exactly to create the MySQL. So it will take some time to spawn that. So I want to see the logs. It's number 14.8. Temporary server started, ready for connections. So I think it's fine. Okay, ready for connections. Good. And now finally, I'm running WordPress with this long monstrous command. And it will be a little bit quicker. B2in. WordPress not found, copying, boom. Apache 2 -d foreground. Okay, and WordPress is running. And now take a look. It was running, we started it publishing port 80. So you know what will happen if I go to port 80 of my local host.
And we should see our blog, right?
Yes. So here we have our amazing WordPress running right now. And we can start it, we can launch it using English, for example. And we can make a site title, Docker. And I don't know, I will use my name as an username, and I will use password by 100-500.
Now I'm hacking into your WordPress blog.
Yeah. Heartily welcome. And I can install WordPress, and we are going in. So username Alex 100-500, login, and here we have our WordPress running, and I can go directly to website, and that's the website, and it's fully operational, and we may see some logs here. So all my requests are live here, and it's all cool. And as long as it works, it's great. But there must be better way.
Yes, I think the word compose might be relevant.
Yeah,
here.
definitely. We have something better. So let's go to another place. Oops. I'm too lazy to type all those commands. I want to have something better. And my answer is Docker Compose. Docker Compose is a tool which exists as long as Docker exists, basically, because from the very beginning of Docker life, people were tired to type all those commands. And that's not only about if you are tired or not, but also this kind of copy-paste is also very error-prone. And if you have to set up the similar environment on the 100 of different workplaces, it's obviously not going to be convenient. Someone will miss a command, someone will miss a made a typo, and so on and so forth. So,
and I just want to be lazy. So
yeah, I want to be lazy. So Docker Compose is a very powerful tool behind the simple idea. When we speak of infrastructure as a code, so the idea to describe your infrastructure in configuration files, we usually speak of the technologies like Terraform, or we speak about the technologies like, I don't know, Google Cloud Manager, CloudFormation, and so on. But Docker Compose, as it is also infrastructure as a code, you describe which containers you need to run. It reads a configuration file and execute proper Docker console commands to get you what you want. And technically speaking, it's just a Python-based wrapper which converts YAML configuration file into Docker commands. So, how exactly does it work? At first, you write or copy-paste or git clone a Docker Compose YAML. Docker Compose YAML is a file in YAML format, configuration format, where you describe what exactly you need to have. First line, you usually will see version. The point is, Docker Compose was evolving very quickly over time, and there were some collisions in configuration format, or how exactly you should describe what you want to get. And usually we always specify a version. Latest version must be 3.8, if I'm not wrong. And if you are just starting and have no Docker legacy, then 3.8 would be a good beginning point for you. When we describe services like WordPress, and what's this WordPress? It's the name of a service which will become a name of a container. And we will use image. This time we will use image WordPress official image, WordPress version 5.5.1 using PHP 7.3, prepared for us by WordPress team based on official PHP image. When we are going to use volumes, so WordPress data mounted to var www HTML. And now it's interesting point, depends on database. Do you remember I've asked you which container should be launched first? Database. Yeah. Because if you run WordPress when database is not ready, it will be not able to connect and you will get an error, or mostly probably even exception. I cannot connect to a database. Now we are publishing ports. Left port for host, right port for the container, always golden rule of Docker. Then I'm going to restart it on failure. So if Docker will quit, if this container will quit with an error code, Docker will restart it. Now notice, this is not Docker Compose feature, it's a Docker feature. Docker Compose is a wrapper over Docker commands. Docker Compose cannot do anything what Docker can't. It's a wrapper.
That's a command that lets you sleep at night.
Yep. And now we define the environment variables. We defined it before. Database host for WordPress, database user, database password, database name. And host is going to be database 3306. So this one is default MySQL port. And here we type database because we have database exactly right here. So this is a DNS name for this container. This container, based on the image MySQL version 5, it mounts volumes MySQL data. It to restart always. That's actually a bad practice, because if you say restart always, even if you stop it intentionally, it will be restarted automatically. In my source code, I fixed that already. And when we have the same settings. Now, some of you, I'm absolutely sure, say that's a bad practice to store password in files like that, because they go to Git, they go to GitHub, and your passwords may leak. And that's perfectly correct, you are right. And we don't store our passwords there, because about that I will speak at the next week, application development with Docker. So stay tuned and join us at the next week. But for now, for the simplification purposes, we will keep it like that. Good. And all I need to run all of this infrastructure now, given I have this file, is just Docker Compose app. And you can do the same. You simply copy paste or git clone this file. You say Docker Compose app -d or Docker Compose app, and you have this MySQL and WordPress running in the proper order with all the required configuration settings. And I really like it. So Let me very briefly do that because I want to move on to the next step. And
yeah. While you're doing that real quick, we got a question here. So Docker Compose is plain Python script. Actually, it's YAML. So it's YAML, and then there's an interpreter in there, and the interpreter just handles it all, turns it all into executable commands, and runs them in the background. So you never have to interact. But no, you're not generally writing Python. You're writing YAML.
Yes. So Docker Compose is a plain Python script, exactly. And it reads YAML files and converts them
to... Compose itself, yes. I'm sorry,
yes,
I misunderstood the question.
So that's very easy to show. Give me a moment. So take a look. I'm going to say which Docker Compose. And I'm going to do head Docker Compose. Oops, okay, looks not so... What did they do to that? Wow, actually that's interesting. It was plain Python script just a couple of years ago. It looks like now they are somehow wrapping that. That's cool. I have to check this out because, well, it was plain Python just a couple of years ago. So, Docker Compose. New. That's a good question. We can take a look at that at the next workshop. But anyway, if you go to... Where is it? GitHub, Docker Compose. Oops, typo. That's my GitHub Docker Compose. And it consists of Python, basically. So it's all a Python project. But they're mostly probably compiling it into something special. But yes, it's Python. Okay, never mind. I don't want to ruin this perfect moment when we are doing one simple thing. Docker Compose up. And few things happen. At first, Docker Compose create network WordPress default with the default driver, so bridge. Then it creates volumes with the default drivers, so local. Then it creates containers we need. And it all starts. WordPress tries to contact MySQL, and that's not successful so far because database is not started. And now, why it happened? I told you before what depends on ensures the order to start the containers. If WordPress needs database will be launched first. But here is a little trick, not nice trick. From the Docker point of view, container is started as soon as it's running already and doing something. And ready point of view for Docker and ready point of view for MySQL are two very different points of view. And therefore, as soon as database were running, it started WordPress, but it was anyway too early because there are some more sophisticated health checks needed to check if MySQL is running or not. But how it goes on our side? Okay, so WordPress was able to contact my database, and it's here. So, oops. So we can go to my local host again. What was the port I've used? Port was 8,000. 8,000.
Okay. Yeah.
Good, and we go to localhost port 8,000. And I have my database running here.
I'm throwing the GitHub for Docker Compose in chat there if anyone wants to actually go and look at the scripts. They have the Python in there and everything.
Yeah, thank you. There is a question. Can't we have MySQL section before WordPress section in YAML file as WordPress depends on database? That absolutely doesn't matter. So the order of the services in the Docker Compose YAML means nothing. It always will look only to depends on. And depends on, as you see, is not exactly enough to handle these kind of things.
Right, because it's not going to sleep for, it's just going to start that container, then try to immediately start up the other one. It's it's like ordering a queue basically.
Yeah.
With no time in between.
Exactly.
But that's where that retry on failure retry line that you have in there, that's where that really helps out, because then, okay, it fails, it's going to wait and retry, wait and retry, wait and retry, and then it'll come up. So,
yep.
Good line to have.
More traditional approach when you have some dependencies of when you have to wait for a longer time, instead of waiting simply to depends on, because as you've seen it's not enough, is to have a special startup script to be executed on container startup. So for example, imagine an application which works with Cassandra and I don't know, Solar. You don't want this application to try to run without full access to all the required services. In this case, you write a startup script to be executed first, simple bash script or I don't know, Python script, whatever you prefer, and you literally wait there as long as given Cassandra hosts and Solar hosts are not available. And then they are available, you release this script, so it's literally like transfers the control to the application what you really has to launch. I will show you it next week. So finally, and there are some last commands you need to learn about Docker Compose. Main things for us was Docker Compose up, but I also can tell Docker Compose up detached, and it will be run in background. And boom, I have my database and WordPress running, but in the detached mode. I can say Docker Compose logs to watch the logs, but also I can say logs -f to follow the logs, not just put everything what I have and quit, but -f, and I can also specify which particular container I want to follow. For example, WordPress only without database, and I will have WordPress only logs. What also I may need to have? I may need to have Docker Compose stop to stop the containers. I may definitely need Docker Compose start to start the containers. And let me check my checklist if I forgot about anything. Up, okay, build, logs and exec. Good, and down. So, few last things. We use Docker Compose with two prepared images, WordPress and Nginx. In some cases, you may need to build something on your own. Well, actually, very often, usually you have to build something. When may be handy Docker Compose build. Docker Compose build will build all the images what your Docker Compose file requires. In our case, we use an image for both of them, so we have nothing to build. What was the last one? Logs. Exec. Okay, very simple. Yeah. If I want to execute a command on the regular Docker container, I have to go docker exec -it for interactive terminal when exec when command I want to exec. In my case, it's easier because I can tell Docker Compose exec service name, let's say WordPress, and I can say bash. And boom, I'm in this container. Yeah, I'm in this container. Where am I? Who am I? What is running? Apache is running, obviously. Good. And finally, a few more things regarding that. It's going to be kill and down. So in some cases, especially when you work with big system and that's not production, to make it quicker, you may simply say Docker Compose kill to quit it in the quick way without giving graceful termination time. No sick term, just sick kill, boom, they're done. And another command you may need is a Docker Compose down. As Docker Compose up creates everything, creates not only the services containers, but also networks, volumes, and so on, Docker Compose down will do exactly the opposite thing. So it will take down not only the containers, but also the network. And now I have nothing on my port 80. I have nothing at all. No containers running. And before we do the final thing, before we do the quiz, I want to show you something very special, what you will like, and it will be the final thing for today. Some of you I've seen already use it, Play with Docker. Play with Docker is a great tool which allows you to run Docker commands in the cloud. Very limited one, of course, but it still allows you to use Docker if you cannot run it locally for any reason. Docker Playground. No. This session is terminated. Please create me a new one. Hey. Hey, you. Oh my God. Exactly the moment I wanted to show it to you.
Yeah.
Let's try again. Okay.
Maybe we go into the quiz and
yeah, let's. This one is really special. I really wanted to do it before quiz, but it looks like it's dead, and that's very, 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 very sad. Okay, final attempt. Oh, come on, session not found. Okay, so let's do a quiz, but stay after the quiz. There are still one very special thing to show and one assignment to do, and we proceed to quiz. Jump back to Menti and let us start. We go to Menti code 1617756.
All right, and I get to do this along with you guys.
And I see, what's the difference between up and start? Is up just a combination on or build and start? And yes, I would better say build and create. But yeah, that's the general idea. So we have enough people on Menti. Set the thumbs up because so we will know. One more person. I need to have 40 persons on Menti. 43 persons on Menti. Okay, 44. Okay, 5 more seconds. We cannot stay here forever.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. 45. So jump in and we are about to go. And answer fast to get more points. Persistent data in Docker is a built-in feature what needs no special configuration, requires special data containers, is supported using volumes and bind mounts, is not supported at all. So let's see. And the correct answer is supported using volumes and bind mounts. Persistent data is not exactly, needs no special configuration, I would say. We've shown you today how much configuration you have to do to have your data persisted. And give me the leaderboard. I think I will see some familiar names, and that's great. And the first place is taken by Holahop, which was the fastest with 938 points. But then Puffy with only 2 points difference, and Adrian is again very, very close. It was the first question. So let's move on. Question 2 of 6. Docker Bridge Network allows containers to communicate only with host. Is a default network to connect containers with each other and host. Connects containers to container only. Connect bridges over the world. And this one was very easy to you. It's a default network to connect containers with each other and host. Very well done, but there are some more tricky questions. So show me you are ready. So what's the changes? And Lorena was the fastest, I think. But, no, okay, Adrian was the fastest. So Sartak, Adrian, and Pranali. Hi, Pranali. Tushar, I see. Japrit, yeah, I see familiar names here. That's great. Good. So, question 3 of 6. Answer fast to get more points. Docker Compose is a tool to manage containers via configuration file. Is a tool to build to publish containers. Required to connect containers. Is a sound system manager. And time is up, so show me your knowledge. And correct answer is Docker Compose is a tool to manage containers via configuration file. Perfectly fine. And we may use Docker Compose to build, but definitely not to publish. Docker Compose has no relation to publishing containers. So that's manage containers via configuration file tool. But no one of the leaders made a mistake. So there are some minor changes. Marcin was the fastest. Adrian got the first place. Sartak is on the second. And Akhil got the third place. That's quite a fighting here. So, what's next then? Question 4. And we are over the half of the quiz. Easiest way to mount a local folder with source code is a copy Docker file directive, got to be pretty weird, create volume, attach volume, use a bind mount via -v or -- mount, type bind, don't mount, just type the source code again in a container.
Yeah, that's an easy way to do it, right?
Yeah, sure. So, the correct answer, use a bind mount via -v or -- mount, type bind. And that's the correct answer. You can mount a local folder with create volume, attach volume, but this local folder going to be in the very deeps of your file system, and especially if you use Docker for Mac or Docker for Windows. And it's definitely not the easiest way to mount a local folder with source code. So, who did the mistake? No one of the leaders did the mistake, but someone was faster than others. And we have
I'm moving up.
Adrian, Sartak, and APG on the third place. So, okay, it looks like it's decided with the first place and second place, but third one, there is a fighting and very small difference in the points. Okay. And question 5. So we are very close. Answer fast. What is -d option for in Docker run? To run containers in background, to detach container from host network, to set container to down state manually, to delegate data distribution to dedicated developer.
Man, did you write these?
Yes. Okay. And it was the trickiest one. So, to run containers in background, yes, to run containers in background, -d option has no relation to networking. We use -d to release the container from the terminal you are starting it in. So, it looks like a lot of people got into the trap. I prepared it for you, but I love you and we will work on it deeper so you will not make me this mistake again. And final one. Stop. Yes, I do expect, but no one of the leaders got into the trap. And we see basically no changes. Okay, that's interesting. Yes.
I'm stuck at 8th place. I can't get above 8.
Keep fighting. Keep fighting. You still have some changes. But well, if they will do a mistake because it's the last question. Now focus. Warm up your fingers. Watch your phone, don't watch YouTube, watch your phone. YouTube has a lag of about 1-2 seconds. And we are start. Answer fast to get more points. Recommended way to persist data managed by container Bind mount the data folder from container to host. Use Docker volume. Run network file storage service in a container, sync with local folder. Or docker exec -- please -- persist -- data. Okay, and again it was a tricky question, and the correct answer to recommended way to persist data managed by container is the use Docker volume. You can use bind mount data folder from container to host, but it's not recommended way to persist data managed by a container. And well, I really like to people who answer a docker exec -- please persist data. That would be my option as well. And final leaderboard. So, and APG made a mistake. I cannot believe in the last question. So, it will be a change. Oh my god, such a fight in the very end. So, Adrian got the first place with 5,652 points, and that's a huge congratulations. Sartak keeps successfully the second place with 5,590 points, and very close Marcin, which was the fastest one to answer the last question. And our Jack Fryer community manager is on vacation today, so I will kindly ask you, Adrian, Sartak, and Marcin, first 3 places, to contact me on Discord as Alex Voleshnev, or write me an email. That's alexander.voleshnev@datastacks.com. Eric, could you please type my email to them?
Yes.
Yep, thank you so much. So on YouTube chat and on Discord you will have my email, so write me, and we will dispatch a nice gift for you. And finally, 2 last questions. But please stay with me, I do want to show you something amazing. If you will stay, you will not regret. But before, 2 answers. What, it looks now different. Okay. Just this morning, this slide looked differently. But okay. How do you like the second week? So, don't forget this workshop, as the first workshop as well, is a part of a series. So you may not get all the data you need right now, but mostly probably we will try to cover them in the upcoming workshops. It's half done, except of the assignment. And I see what most of you is very happy, and thank you so much. And finally, what would you suggest? Any feedback? That's an open question. So feel free to type whatever you want to suggest to us. No. Great, very impressive.
I guess we're done, Alex.
Yeah. It's really great already. Thank you. Nothing. So it looks like we did our job very well, Eric. Good.
I'm happy.
So, use Cassandra for demos, not MySQL. There was a great conversation about that. Cassandra for demos, not MySQL. Take a look. Is Docker ecosystem easy? No, it isn't. There is a lot to learn. And there is a simple educational trick. When you bring new concepts, use familiar tools. When you bring new tools, use familiar concepts. That's why I decided to intentionally stop on the MySQL today, because this database is familiar to everyone who is attending us in general, and it was completely intended. And
teaching you Cassandra and Docker at the same time is a lot.
Yeah, do more jokes. Okay, we will try. Kubernetes, please. Eric, I guess the point is, original intention was to run 4 workshop series without Kubernetes. But then people start to ask for Kubernetes workshop, and we did this workshop today earlier with Cedric, and I told like, okay, that's my boss. Tell him we need Kubernetes. I would be glad to do it. And like all these feedback page was Kubernetes.
I think we'll need to look at building out some Kubernetes content
Yep.
to deliver in the near future. Yeah, I think that's definitely.
So Cedric agrees with that. So it looks like this workshop series will be extended to 5th class with Kubernetes. So that's a good news. It's not fully confirmed, but in the next week, I guess it will be confirmed completely. And now finally, so thank you so much for all your answers. I will try once more to run this damn demo because it's my favorite part of this. I will try to clean cache maybe.
We'll give you one try here. We're about 10 minutes over, so don't want to keep people too much longer.
So I don't want to keep anyone. If you are too busy, you may get right now and watch it in the recording then later. But this one is very short. While it's starting, hopefully it will start, there is something in week 2 I really like. We use it to work with simple run single container. Today we finally did some WordPress, but what I want to show is a real complex application, which is still a demo application, so you can walk through it very simply. There is nearly no code, but meanwhile it's a very complex application which literally looks like that. So does it look impressive? That's the so-called microservices-oriented application to vote with the voting front-end in Python, Redis queue to dispatch votes processing to Java workers, multiple Java workers, notice, and Java workers store processed votes into PostgreSQL, and when we have resulting front-end, which is a Node.js application showing the vote results. Out of them, Redis and Postgres are prepared images, and Java, Python, and Node.js are developed by Docker people a long time ago as a demo, and we adjusted them for our purposes. So how it looks with my play with Docker? It was restarted with no cache. Please, 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 please. Okay, at least it's doing something, which is already better. No, okay. Eric, I need you. We are here together and teamwork is always better. I need you to share your screen and go to playwithdocker.com.
Yeah, give me a moment here.
Yeah.
Bringing up a new window.
I have a plan B.
Share screen. Start sharing. They're going to get to see how we're doing all of this.
And we see your screen. That's perfect.
With docker.com. With Docker, I'm going to log into Docker. Oh, goodness. I don't remember. Oh, boy. What is it? I don't know, man. Give me a second. I can try to look it up. It's been forever since I've logged in here. Let's see. Yeah, I might not have my login, Alex.
Okay, no worries. That's fine. That was completely unexpected for you. I understand. I will try to launch it in the incognito. I will use my Docker ID. Maybe in incognito mode it will start to work better.
Could be.
Come on. Okay.
They might be having some issues.
Yeah, it looks like they are having issues so far. Okay, then what I can say, I still have it here. It would be much better when everyone would be able to vote. But if I cannot run it like this, at least I can run it on my screen. And that's going to be Docker compose up. So while it's starting, it looks much better when, you know, like many dozens of people are voting at the same time. That's what I wanted to have. I cannot publish this one to the internet. So we need to watch the logs. Okay, so it's all operational. Then I have my Docker Compose. Where is my Docker Compose for voting up? Yes, here we go. I have ports 5000 for one and 5001 for the second one, so I can go to my localhost 5000. And I have very simple vote here, cats versus dogs. And I'm a completely cats person, so I will stick to cats. And boom, my vote was processed. And there's really a sad, complicated workflow behind that, because it's first processed by my voting front end, dispatched to Redis queue, consumed by Java worker, one Java worker so far, and consumed by, and then processed and stored as a processed vote to PostgreSQL and dispatched by resulting. So we can go to resulting, we can go to localhost 5001 and see the results. It looks like cats are completely winning. But now, there is something great I always like to see. One more Docker Compose command you may like. That's the Docker Compose scale. And with Docker Compose scale, I may say worker equals 3. And Docker Compose creates new workers for me. And okay, now it's up command with a scale flag instead. Docker evolves over time, and that's great. Now we can watch with Docker Compose PS how many containers I'm running, and that looks much more. And now I can say Docker Compose logs following only worker containers. And I have a bunch of my workers connected. And now every time I will change my vote, in the first up, switching to dogs and to cats back and to dogs and to cats, I will every time have the same in my, have something new in my logs. Why? Because different workers will process this handling. So by using the scaling for the containers, I very easily have within just a couple of commands, Docker Compose up, Docker Compose scale. I have 8 applications running and processing system for me, written on only application servers, written on free, application server Java, web servers Node.js and Python, and I don't even remember what's for Redis and PostgreSQL, but that's a pretty complicated system running right now, and I want cats to win in the very end. Yeah, and we've Play with Docker, I wanted everyone to vote and see what do you think about cats and dogs, but as long as Play for Docker behaves, at least you always can pull this repository Docker learning path, or you can fork it and run this Docker Compose YAML on your own. One nice thing to mention, instead of using images, those are pre-built. I just want to be quick. You can switch to build directive, switch to local build to see how it goes, and those applications will be built locally. So you can put your changes into the language of your choice, voting for Python, result for JavaScript, and worker for Java, whatever you prefer. So you can make some changes and work how do they work in general. And that leads us to the final part of today's workshop. Live quiz is done. Week 2 assignment. I don't know if you like quiz more than assignment or vice versa. I definitely like both. Assignment is going to be a bit bigger today than it was last week. So, first of all, last week we containerized a simple application. This week, I want to proceed working on that, but I also want to see what you are doing, help you with that, and make you helping each other and collaborating on the projects. So your first task to keep working with Docker, but now using also Docker Compose. You need to have more complex setup with now multiple containers running simultaneously and communicating, for example, as our WordPress system. It should include at least one predefined image like MySQL or whatever you prefer to use, and one custom image you built based on something. It should persist data, so removing of the containers will not remove volumes. Please use our week 2 samples for the inspiration. So that's a WordPress setup and voting application setup. If possible, it will be not possible if you work on your own proprietary project. I very understand that. But if you work on the project you can publish, then please go on, create a repo on GitHub and publish your project there. So we can see what you did. Then go to DataStax Devs Docker Learning Path issues and create a new issue using my template. That's, here we go, issues, new issue, week 2 assignment, get started. And you have everything pre-filled, so you fill your name, your GitHub repository link, and brief description of the project. And then finally, when you write it, choose an issue of any another submitter from the list, any of person working on this course. Write a comment what you would like to review it. Go check out the project, review the Docker files, review the Docker Compose files, learn from them, analyze them, suggest them. Maybe you would do something in another way, or maybe you don't understand why it's done this way, not other way around. And write down your suggestions in the issue comments. Feel free to review multiple projects if you have time, then it's great. And also feel free to review a taken one because, well, we may have multiple people reviewing the projects. That's very, very fine. Most important thing, stay polite. Feedback always absolutely must be positive, in the positive way. If you want us to review your assignment publicly and talk a little bit what was done right and what was done wrong, send an issue link to me in Discord or via email. We will pick some projects, not all of them, of course, but we will pick a couple of projects to discuss during the free application development, because next week is going to be for the application development. And we will cover both good ideas and not so good ideas, but again, we will stay polite, so don't worry. And final task, we spent already 4 hours together counting week 1 and week 2. So I guess we know each other good enough to add each other on LinkedIn. So I will be very happy if you add me, Eric, and DataStax Devs team on the LinkedIn. It's always great to have new friends. And based on that, thank you. You are incredible, and we are very happy what you was with us. We are over time already, so we can't answer questions, but we will answer your questions on Discord, okay?
Wonderful. All right, well, thank you, Alex. This has been wonderful content. I learned a few things, so that's awesome.
That's great. And, thank you so much. Okay. So see you again next week. And next week, join us at Discord, fork the repo, create issues, ask questions. That was Alex Volochnev and Erick ZIETLOW, developer advocates at DataStax. And see you next week.